Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're doing another episode of Contrast and Chaos. In this series, we compare various murderers and serial killers or otherwise notorious figures, and we examine some of the skills they use to commit their acts, to manipulate, and to otherwise present in specific ways. The examples today are John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy, both who are incredibly effective liars. So we're going to be looking today at how they lie. Before we get started, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. So very briefly, before we get into this, I want to talk a little bit about how lying works, how we detect lies, and how you can detect lies as we're watching this. Generally speaking, people don't like to lie. They feel anxious when they lie. They feel discomfort when they lie. If it's about something small, they might not feel it, but when it's something of consequence, they're going to spill out the nervousness, the anxiety, the stress, all the emotions. You're going to be able to identify those if you know what to look for. Now, today we're looking at John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy, people that don't have a lot of anxiety, people that don't necessarily have any problems lying. So what we need to look for is, do they feel excited when they lie? What spills out when they lie? Because they do feel something. So now we're going to watch an interview with John Wayne Gacy. He is someone who is able to lie and lies about everything. You watch someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, for example. As best as we can tell, he's pretty minimal as far as the number of lies that he tells. He's pretty straightforward. He has different tells when it comes to how he's feeling. But John Wayne Gacy tells big, bold, direct lies over and over again. And he does it convincingly. We're going to watch this. We're going to see what body language spills out. And we're going to see if we can identify what and how he's feeling at various points in the interview.
If they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
Those are the words of John Wayne.
All right, so the first thing you're going to notice is that after he lied, after he says you're going to be executing an innocent man, he licks his lips a little bit. Now, this could be due to excitement. Sometimes we do this when we get anxious. I really don't think that John Wayne Gacy gets anxious during this interview. I don't think that anxiety is a big problem for him. But you're going to see that there's little things we have to look for if we want to know if there's markers or if there's tells when they are lying. So we've noticed that now. We're going to keep watching for that, and we'll see what else spills out as we continue to watch this interview. Let's watch that one more time.
Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
Those are the words of John Wayne Gacy.
When they paint the image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies, I said, this is ludicrous.
So listen to the way that he's talking. This is ludicrous. His voice register is getting a little bit higher. This is somebody who's speaking as though that there is disbelief. You're going to see his eyes raise up like this. Watch this.
When they paint the image that I was this monster.
So he's saying this as though it's shocking, that this is surprising. This is a very effective liar. The way that he's speaking, the way that he's looking. This is someone, he's probably practiced these lies, I would guess. These are probably things that he's thought of ahead of time. He didn't give a lot of interviews up to this point, so he's had plenty of time to practice this, to think about it. But he really is doing a convincing job of lying right here.
Monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies. I said, this is ludicrous.
And he's also avoiding using language that would evoke a negative response in somebody else, that swatted them like flies, rather than talking about murder, rather than talking about the things that actually happened. He uses words to sort of sanitize what he did.
An ethical, hardworking family man. Here's how he describes himself as a father.
Loving and caring.
Interesting. When he's describing himself as a father, because that was a question that was asked, we're seeing contempt. Watch his mouth right here.
Family man. Here's how he describes himself as a father.
Loving and caring.
That is a look of contempt.
I've always looked after my children, even now. A lot of things that my dad did, I refuse to do, because I don't believe in hitting children. I don't believe in spoiling a child either.
There we saw it again. So when he thinks about the idea of spoiling his kids, he feels contemptuous about that. Watch this.
Hitting children, I don't believe in spoiling a child either. My values are such that if you give enough love to the children...
You're accused of murdering 33 kids, and you say you didn't believe in hitting. I mean...
Well, anybody that knows... You see, first of all, you're basing this garbage on what you've heard of me.
Once again, this is a very effective way to lie. So he's being confronted, and rather than feeling irritated, rather than looking angry, he knows he has an audience. He's smiling a little bit. He's acknowledging, you've heard all these things about me. That stuff's not true. It's really an effective way to lie. Watch this again.
Anybody that knows, you see, first of all, you're basing this garbage on what you've heard of me.
What happened to, what happened in the Bukovic case? Where was he picked up, and how did he get to the house, and what happened with him?
All right, so you just saw the mouth cover. Now, this is something that we oftentimes do when we don't want to say something. It can be a reaction to shock as well. You can see this, and I just did a video recently where somebody was shocked and they were covering their mouth. He's not shocked about anything. He's covering his mouth because this is something he doesn't really want to talk about. There's something about this that agitates him. Let's keep going. Watch this again, and then I'm going to play through.
Where was he picked up, and how did he get to the house, and what happened with him?
I don't want to go into the other, the 5 that I know about. Just take it that I didn't. Bukovic is not one that I killed, so I don't know nothing about him.
All right, so he's saying that he doesn't know anything about any of these people. There's other interviews where he's talked about this. He says he has no recollection of any of these people. He doesn't remember any of this. There's another interview where he goes through pictures of them and goes, I don't know who any of these people are. Once again, just very bold, very believable in terms of the way that he says it lies. Not believable in the sense that they were absurd, but the way that he says it, the way that he delivers it is very accurate. And it goes to show why he was able to hide for so long. Because people like this are able to live normal lives. They're able to pass as normal people, for lack of a better term. And as you can see here, he may not come across as creepy as you might expect. It's not that you have good feelings watching him talk, but he's kind of like a salesman. He knows how to interact with people. He knows how to get along with people. He's not weird in that sense.
Bukovic is not one that I killed, so I don't know nothing about him. The little bit that I know about him is that he was an employee of mine. See, when you look about this recall business, and
I'm not a prosecutor, John, but you just
I know
said
you're not.
Bukovic
Wait a minute.
is not one that.
So now we're going to deal with John Wayne Gacy starting to feel irritated. He's saying, I'm not a prosecutor, John. So in other words, he's trying to disarm him and say, hey, don't be defensive. But being called out in that way is going to be very agitating for somebody that needs as much control and has as much anger as someone like John Wayne Gacy. You're very briefly going to see that anger. You're going to see the frustration on his face, but he hides it well because his goal is to connect with an audience, to say, hey, I didn't do these things, so you're going to execute the wrong guy, but there's nothing I can do about that. Here, watch this.
Wait a minute.
Is not one that you.
See right there. He's starting to bite his lip. I think this looks more like anger than stress, because sometimes people purse their lips when we start feeling stressed. To me, it looks like he might actually be biting his lip a little bit like this. Watch this again, then we'll keep going.
And
I'm not a prosecutor, John, but you just
I know
said
you're not.
Bukovic
Wait a minute.
is not one that you killed, which suggests that maybe, in fact, there were others that you did kill. I mean, I'm not.
Okay, I'm sorry if I led you to believe. No, strike it then. That is wrong.
Now, I talked about synchronous head nods and head shakes. This one is a little bit out of sync. Watch this part.
I'm sorry if I led you to believe. No, strike it then. That is wrong.
So that is wrong. Shakes it afterwards. We oftentimes associate that with manipulation, that when people can't sync it together correctly, that it's less likely to be true. Typically, he's able to do it, but he misses it right here.
I'm sorry if I led you to believe. No, strike it then. That is wrong. He was transported to the house by another.
How did the other, whoever he was, kill Robert Peace?
I believe he was strangled.
You were there, right?
Not during the crime, but I was there afterwards, and I watched the removal of the body.
And what happened to the body afterwards?
He acts so natural. This is very, very impressive to be talking about something so serious and for it to be so bold and for it to seem so accurate in terms of using the right types of body language. You really have to watch closely to see the wrong type of body language spill out with John Wayne Gacy. Watch this again and I'll break it down for you.
I believe he was strangled.
You were there.
So he's keeping himself busy while paying attention. He's being casual in a way that seems comfortable. So he seems very comfortable right now. He's messing with papers while he's talking.
Right?
Not during the crime, but I was there afterwards, and I watched the removal of the body.
So he very accurately is nodding and shaking his head in subtle, correct places.
And what happened to the body afterwards? Was one that was that
It was
that
taken
body
to the
was
river.
put into the
It was
river.
taken to the river and dumped in the river.
Did you help do that?
Yes, I'm in complicity with that. I've always contended. Don't look at me as an innocent babe of the woods.
Really a masterful way to lie, to acknowledge, hey, you know, I'm not a perfect guy. I've got some problems, but I didn't do the extreme stuff people are talking about. And once again, obviously I don't believe anything he's saying, but he does say it in a way that is convincing. And I'm sure that there are some people, like I've said, that watch this and get convinced by it, that feel like, well, maybe he's not the right guy.
I said, there's the last section where the last section of concrete was poured. Okay, they are the ones that took the orange can of paint and said, here, put a mark there.
All right, so John Wayne Gacy labeled where some of the bodies were. They had him take spray paint and he put an X where one of the bodies was buried. It, in fact, was buried there. Now he's saying that he didn't do that for that reason. Just listen to this, just so you have some context with what he's talking about.
Okay, they are the ones that took the orange can of paint and said, here, put a mark there. So I put an X there.
So the paint was not to identify the place of burial?
No, it never was.
All right, so you see the lip licking again. This is exciting to him because this is one that I think he feels like is a really good lie. So I think that he gets excited when he says this lie. Watch this part right here.
So the paint was not to identify the place of burial?
No, you're in trouble now.
Yeah, right.
Aren't you afraid sitting that close to me?
And so now, once again, this is using a little bit of charm to try to get along with the interviewer. The interviewer is giving him a shoelace because he wants him to demonstrate something, and he's making jokes about, hey, do you really want to trust me with this? It makes him seem more benign than he is.
What the hell? Oh, this is too long. You don't need it this long. Well, show us what that is. So I took, at that time, and again, it's together, but in order to demonstrate it here, I took the rosary and I said, well, here, you put it around. This is hard trying to do this. Why don't you put your hand out?
All right, now this is something that I probably would feel very, very uncomfortable with. So I think that Gacy probably really enjoys having this level of control over somebody, saying, hey, put your hand out, let me do this to you. Whether it's that he gets to touch somebody else in this way, or just that he's having somebody go along with what he's telling them to do. He's getting to make demands and somebody's following along.
Okay, here, what I told him, I said, here, all you do is you wrap it around, you put one knot in it. And I said, then you put a second knot in it, okay? I said, then you take a stick and stick it in here, and you just turn this. And I says, it causes a tourniquet. I said, that's the only knot I ever...
He must have been thrilled to be able to do this tourniquet on somebody that was not in the correctional facility he was in. I'm just pointing this interaction out because I'm not criticizing the interviewer. I mean, he can do whatever he wants, but I do think that John Wayne Gacy probably got more joy from this than you might expect. So now we're going to look at Ted Bundy and how he lies. It's quite a bit different than Gacy, although the size of the lies are quite similar. The way he lies, he's a little bit more cerebral. He tries to connect emotionally in a different way. He laughs. He tries to use comparisons. He tries to make people think more than John Wayne Gacy does. Let's watch a little bit about how he lies, and then we can talk about how the two of them contrast with each other relative to the way they lie.
Simply read newspapers and articles. No, I won't admit that. No, there's. I don't call it. It's not circumstantial.
So you see him laughing, smiling. He laughs a lot during this interview. That's part of how he likes to connect with people. He is really good at mimicking emotions that he is not actually feeling.
No, I won't admit that. No, there's. I don't call it. It's not circumstantial as far as I'm concerned. I don't really know exactly what you're referring to, and I don't really want to discuss it. But I don't care what anybody says or the suspicions anyone harbors on the basis of that misinformation. And indeed, that's what I call.
This is an effective way to lie. Watch this part right here.
Yeah, the suspicions anyone harbors on the basis of that misinformation.
So he says misinformation, raising his eyebrows, bringing emphasis to his face. He wants people to know this is misinformation that's being told to you.
And indeed, that's what I call it. Circumstantial information, perhaps, but misinformation as far as I'm concerned. A lot of people trying to pin a lot of stuff on somebody because, it's convenient. But...
And it's almost like he wanted himself to stop talking right there. Covered his mouth for a second. There's various reasons I've talked about people covering their mouths. Oftentimes, it's either shock or trying to stifle yourself saying something. So he covered his mouth. He's stroking his chin. I don't think he feels anxious because of lies that he's telling. I think that he's trying to figure out how to smoothly transition to something else because he's ready to move on.
You think you've been set up? Well, I don't think there's any broad scheme, but I think one begins.
So this is smart. So he's saying, I don't think there's any broad scheme when he asks if he's been set up, because that is a rational way to answer a question like that. But let's hear where it keeps going from here.
I think one begins to, I would have to infer that based on some of the police activity, I think, following November.
So he knows that telling lies requires that he is a believable historian, that he is not somebody that just believes every wild thing. So starting off the lie by saying, well, I don't think there's any broad scheme, but yes, I do think that I'm being set up. That is a convincing way to lie. That's able to acknowledge, yeah, I think I'm being plotted against, without it sounding wild or sounding accusatory in that sense. So this is a very effective way to lie.
75, you'd have to say that there was a general design amongst police officers in several jurisdictions to do whatever they could. And I think a statement recently made by a sheriff in Utah County, I believe, he said that he walked out in some of those meetings because it was just clear that they had one thing on their mind, and they were going to do anything to prove it. And I think this trial will show exactly what they've done.
So he goes from saying, no, I don't think there was any broad conspiracy, to, yeah, ultimately there was, and yes, and here's evidence for that. So he's able to weave narratives in a way that's very effective.
I'm not going to sit here and say people have perjured themselves, but I think that'll come out.
Are you angry?
Sure, I get angry. Very, very angry.
Once again, here he is acknowledging, yes, I feel anger sometimes. Sure, I get angry. The more he can normalize himself. So this is really what Ted Bundy does. He tries to normalize himself. Look at what a normal guy I am. See how much you can relate to me. This is why some people find him charming.
Angry and indignant. I don't like being locked up for something I didn't do, and I don't like my liberty taken away, and I don't like being treated like an animal, and I don't like people walking around and ogling me like I'm some sort of weirdo, because I'm not.
So you see the sideways smile. It's either because it's a fake smile or because it's contempt. Watch this right here.
Weirdo, because I'm not.
So it's hard not to take some of these facial expressions as contempt, because when people do this, if it's a real facial expression, it is a contemptuous one. However, he fakes emotion so much. It's possible that he's trying to smile here, or he's trying to look like he's smiling, but he's not actually feeling much of anything. That's entirely possible right here. So I can't guarantee you that contempt is what he's actually feeling.
I'm perfectly happy with the person I am, and I've always been. There's I don't pay my telephone bills on time, and I don't write my mother as many letters as I should. There are all kinds of things I can improve about myself, but a weirdo.
See, there we go. Once again, relating to the everyday person. Look, here are faults that I have, just like every one of you. He's very much like a politician in this sense.
I feel good about myself. I'm happy with myself.
You don't change. You stay Ted Bundy 24 hours a day.
Well, gee, that name.
So you see the lip licking. Once again, when people do this, it's either out of nervousness or excitement. I'm guessing for him it's excitement. These are lies that he's telling that I think he feels like are landing pretty well. I think he's very proud of himself every time he goes through one of these monologues. Watch this right here.
24 hours a day.
Well, be afraid to get back out into society. They'd be afraid of being shot or getting another beef put on them, okay? But some would. All I'm saying is, I'm no fool. I don't like being locked up, and I don't think any man does.
So this is something else that he does, and I pointed this out in my last video. He looks at the camera a lot during monologues. Now, what he's saying right now, I'm not showing the whole thing because it's really long. He's basically giving a TED talk on why he doesn't want to be in prison and why nobody likes being in prison. But watch the way that his eyes meet the camera after he's coming to a close at the end of this long monologue.
Another beef put on them, okay? But some would. All I'm saying is, I'm no fool. I don't like being locked up, and I don't think any man does.
That's the message he wants people to hear is, I don't like being locked up, and neither does anyone else. And that's the politician part of him saying, hey, look, just like everybody else, I don't like this, and I've been mistreated, and I shouldn't be here. And anybody that would be in my position would feel the same way. And that's why he looks at the camera, to make sure that message is getting driven home. This is something we see oftentimes with psychopaths or people that are lying, is they will look to their audience. They will look at the person they're talking to. If there's an investigator or if there's somebody interrogating them, they'll look at them very intently to make sure you're believing me, right? Now he's doing this to a camera, so to whenever people are watching this later on, if it was on the news or TV or whatever, but he knows that this will be heard and seen by people, so that's what he's trying to do. I'll show it one last time.
All I'm saying is, I'm no fool. I don't like being locked up, and I don't think any man does.
You talked about getting...
And then there was a lip licking afterward, because after all of that, the adrenaline's going. He's feeling very satisfied with himself. Once again, this is not a lip licking related to anxiety. This is one of satisfaction.
Do you ever worry about what some of the parents of some of these women who think you are guilty, that they might come after you?
I don't worry.
You see this brow right here. This is not a look of concentration. This is a look of irritation. That's a little bit of anger he's feeling when the interviewer is asking him, how do you feel about the idea that some of these mothers might come after you? I don't think he's afraid of that at all. But the idea of somebody coming after him, that brings him a little bit of actual anger, I think. But watch this part again.
You are guilty, that they might come after you?
I don't worry about it. There are crazy people anywhere. I've been told that the parents of these girls are fairly decent people. I don't know, and I really feel for them, because apparently they've suffered an incredible tragedy in their lives. The loss of a loved one is probably the most extreme kind of loss you can suffer in this life.
Now, this part, he's blinking a lot more than usual. Watch this. As he's talking about these families, as he's talking about the mothers of these people that he murdered, watch his eyes right here.
Apparently they've suffered an incredible tragedy in their lives. The loss of a loved one is probably the most extreme kind of loss you can suffer in this life. And I say...
So you saw the blinking a lot when he's talking about the mothers of the people that he killed. Now, he may feel a little bit of stress talking about this, because this is a very consequential thing to talk about. He needs to come across as very convincing, and he needs to come across as empathic in this situation. So there may be just a little bit of self-doubt about how he's coming across right here, because so much of what he's doing is not authentic. So much of it's fake anyway.
I feel as much for them as anybody can, not having gone through that myself. But as far as worrying about that, hey, if someone's crazy enough and nutty enough to do something like that, I can't stop them. There's nothing I can do.
You are not guilty.
Once again, this is him trying to say, look, I'm vulnerable. If someone is going to be crazy and try to hurt me, I can't do anything about it. He wants people to hear that. Once again, he's trying to make himself more relatable.
I can't stop them. There's nothing I can do.
You are not guilty.
I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old? I am not guilty of the charges which have been filed against me.
And the allegations.
This is a big one. This is an important thing. Now he's stating in a very direct fashion whether or not he is guilty. He deflects a little bit because he tries to relate to people by saying, hey, I'll give you a little bit. I've stolen comic books before. I've done these kinds of things before. So yeah, I am guilty of crimes, but not that. And as I've said before, as I pointed out, he does this over and over again, and it's an effective strategy. It works on some people.
The time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old, I am not guilty of the charges which have been filed against me.
And the allegations.
So he is doing a lot with his mouth right now. There was a slight flick of the tongue. Now he's pursing his lips a little bit. It may be that there's a little bit of stress leaking through with this as he's answering something, once again, that is of big consequence. You may see some of that leaking through, but he is a very effective liar.
And the allegations.
The rumors and the
I don't know all of what you're speaking about, Lucky. It's too broad and I can't get into it in any detail.
And he used the name of the interviewer for a second. And that's another way to try to charm people. I don't know who you're talking about. Saying their name makes you feel closer to them. So he wants his interviewer to be closer to him, to make sure that when he asks questions, there's a connection there. Because that could frame whether or not the interviewer is hostile. You know, if the interviewer, for example, really wants to embarrass him and really wants to come at him, he's going to be less likely to do that if he feels a kinship with him. He'll be softer on him, I presume, is what Ted Bundy is thinking. So as he tries to connect in that way, using somebody's first name in the middle of a conversation is very effective. Listen to this part again. You'll see what I'm talking about.
I don't know all of what you're speaking about, Lucky. It's too broad and I can't get into it in any detail. But I'm satisfied with my blanket statement that I'm innocent. No man is truly innocent. I mean, we all have transgressed in some way in our lives. And as I say,
It's interesting. This is also a message that Richard Ramirez has, which is everybody is somewhat evil. Nobody's innocent. Many of these serial killers try to bring other people to their level to say, look, well, you've done things too, so you need to feel bad about it. I think that's their own way of trying to manipulate people and make them feel guilt, or to make them question whether or not this person really is so bad. Should they be forgiven for what they did if everybody does bad things?
I've been impolite, and there are things I regret having done in my life. But nothing like the things I think that you're referring to.
So now you've gotten a chance to see John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy saying things that are verifiably untrue. We know that these were lies. And looking at them, we can see why people might be affected by how they say things, by how they present. Because John Wayne Gacy at times comes across like a car salesman, like a friendly person in the community. Ted Bundy comes across as a little bit more cerebral, but he can fake emotions very effectively. They both have very subtle tells, very small cues, and both clearly feel very, very comfortable lying. Now, John Wayne Gacy stands out because the types of lies that he'll tell, he will tell somebody in a very comfortable and very effective way that they're lying directly to their face. He has confessed before to the murders. He showed police where bodies were, and now he will lie convincingly. He didn't say any of that. That's just not true. Whereas for Ted Bundy, eventually he did acknowledge the murders, but it was to further a scheme to try to get another stay of execution. I think that Gacy and Bundy both were continuing to try to extend their lives a little bit with some of the later interviews that they did and some of the lies that came with that. So you can think of John Wayne Gacy's lies in the way he presents as more like a salesman, whereas Ted Bundy is more like a politician. Both very effective liars, both very different styles of connecting with people. And what's different about them than somebody like cult leaders is that cult leaders go after vulnerable people. The goal of a cult leader is to find the small percentage of people out there that are going to believe what they say. Whereas Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy want everybody to believe their lies. They want to seem as normal as possible. They want the general population to believe their lies. So the way that they try to connect is very different than someone like a cult leader would be. So people like Jim Jones, Marshall Applewhite, both incredible liars as well, but a very different type of liar. So this is hopefully helping you better understand the ways that psychopaths lie, the types of lies that they tell. And hopefully you can see how John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy, in terms of the ways that they lie, are similar yet quite different. And one prominent feature of both of these psychopaths is the way that they can easily and effectively lie. Hopefully you've learned something from this episode of Contrast and Chaos. I plan to do more. If you have any suggestions of people you'd like contrasted, please let me know. The goal is to find two similar yet different killers, murderers, or otherwise generally notorious people that we can compare. So if you have any ideas, just put them in the comments below. Last thing I want to say before we wrap things up is that I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.